at least one more witness expected to testify before the New York grand jury investigating former President Trump and hush money payments possibly made to adult entertainment star Stormy Daniels on his behalf. The testimony expected when the grand jury does meet at 2 Eastern time, that is this afternoon, and it's not clear how many witnesses are left and if Trump will actually be indicted, despite his claim over the weekend that an indictment was, quote, imminent and he would be taken into custody yesterday. I do want to talk more about how a possible arrest and indictment would actually look. Dave Aronberg is the Palm Beach County, Florida State Attorney, which would be the same position as the District Attorney, including in Manhattan. I do want to bring him in to talk a little bit more about all of this. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Of course, and you were over there in Palm Beach County, Florida, where Mar-a-Lago is located. We know that former President Trump claimed that he would be arrested Tuesday, so that was yesterday, but now it appears there's still another witness left to testify before the grand jury. If Trump is to be indicted, when would we actually expect an arrest to happen?
Josh, it depends. I think the earliest that an indictment would occur would be today, and then New York would notify Trump's lawyers and arrange for a self-surrender. So that could happen later today, it could happen tomorrow, or it could happen next week. We don't know yet, and we don't know who this final witness is. To me, the interesting thing is what happens if Trump decides not to self-surrender, decides to fight extradition. Then it would go to the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. So that makes it really interesting that Trump's number one political nemesis could decide whether or not Trump gets extradited now or later. DeSantis could delay matters. He can't block the extradition, but he could delay matters. So Trump could put DeSantis in an interesting position if he decides to fight extradition.
That's interesting. I haven't really heard anyone talk about that just yet. So the real question here, if an arrest is to happen, let's say he is there in New York as this does unfold here, are we talking about someone being handcuffed, being escorted in a perp walk type situation? Or, as you mentioned, are we talking more of a surrender to a certain location?
This is one area where Trump will be treated differently than others. Because he's a former president, he has Secret Service protection, and the Secret Service is unlikely to allow other law enforcement agencies to get their hands on Trump. And so what I think will happen, they'll arrange for Trump to go to New York. This is if he agrees to self-surrender, and then be processed without handcuffs, get fingerprinted, have a mugshot, and then get his bail, which will be $0. He'll be on his own recognizance to come back for the trial later on. So then he'd go back home to Mar-a-Lago. Now, all this assumes that he agrees to this. He may decide to make a spectacle out of it and show up with the handcuffs. Say, I demand to be handcuffed. I demand to have a perp walk, because there are reports that he wants to use that as a galvanizing image for his base. So really the ball will be in his court.
Now, would Trump actually spend time in jail? You just talked about the fact that his bond would essentially be $0. He'd be released on his own recognizance. Could he actually spend any time in jail as he does wait for that arraignment?
No, he will not spend any time in jail pending trial unless the terms of his pretrial release are violated. So if he gets his pretrial release as we expect on his own recognizance, and he violates a term of it, such as if the judge says you can't write inflammatory things on social media. I mean, that's a possible restriction. And then he does, he could be brought back, and then he could be put in jail pending trial. I think it's very unlikely, but I'm just spitballing here what possibilities there are that he would be incarcerated before trial. Very few possibilities, very unlikely, but it's not totally out of the question.
So a question that we have heard quite a bit, especially over the last few days, is an indictment actually imminent, as so many people seem to think? You've heard from former President Trump over the weekend. He said he would be arrested on Tuesday. That obviously didn't happen. But is an indictment necessarily going to happen?
I think so, Josh. I can't imagine that this has gone this far. This zombie investigation is what the DA refers to it as, because it's an investigation that's been going on for 5 years, starts and stops. You just can't kill it. And now here we are with the leaks that have come out that Michael Cohen has testified, who should be the exclamation point. Donald Trump has been offered to testify. He sent Robert Costello, a lawyer, in his place. And we're going to go down this road for the grand jury to say, nah, I think that it's really pretty much a certainty that Trump is going to be indicted. The question is when, and I think that's going to happen as early as today.
And then when does the arraignment happen at that point?
Well, the arraignment could happen when he goes up for the bond hearing, but it's up to New York rules up there if they do their arraignment at the same time. Arraignment is when you would plead not guilty. And so it could happen at the time he's up there for the bond, or it could happen later, and then it could be done without him in person. It could be done through his attorneys. So 100% guarantee he's going to plead not guilty, and then this case will eventually happen. I think one question is, does it happen before the 2024 elections? I think time's running out, and I think it's unlikely. This is the kind of thing that could get pushed past the election, because Trump is very good at delaying matters, and I think his legal team will probably try to fight the indictment in the courts to push it past the election.
What are the odds that Ron DeSantis actually has to get involved in this situation? Is that something that is fairly likely?
I think it is going to happen if Trump fights extradition. Now, DeSantis says, I'm not getting involved in all this, but he's going to have to, because if Trump decides to fight extradition, then New York would go to the governor of Florida, and there'll be paperwork on DeSantis's desk to sign to extradite. He can't avoid that. Either he signs it or he doesn't. Now, there is another avenue for DeSantis. He could delay matters by sending this to the Attorney General's office for an investigation to see if the extradition is proper. But really, DeSantis's role here is ministerial. He can't stop the extradition. He can delay it about up to 90 days. And that's something Trump may want. But in the end, Trump's not going to be happy with DeSantis either way, just like he was not happy with Mike Pence over January 6th. Because even though DeSantis' role here is ministerial, Trump will probably expect him to do something more, which DeSantis is not going to do.
All right, Dave Aronberg, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. Anything else that you want to add before I let you go?
These are unprecedented times. And I think that those who think that this case is small ball and will create a political firestorm, perhaps, but I do believe it's going to be followed by other indictments, Fulton County and the feds, over the documents at Mar-a-Lago and possibly January 6th. So I think a lot of the controversy over this indictment may get washed away once the others start coming, and those other cases are stronger cases against the former president.
All right, thank you again for taking the time to help break that down for us.
Thank you, Josh.